Cotuit Civic Association. The primary purpose is twofold. One is to have a presentation from the board department concerning a proposed rate structure. And the other is a discussion by the fire department after that about a proposed project which we may or may not discuss depending upon time. So without any further ado,
Fire district.
sorry,
Fire district.
fire district, I apologize.
Hi, I'm Tom Hoppenstead with the Cotuit Fire District's Water Commission, and I guess first thing I want to do is the formality, which is open a public meeting, because all three of us are here today for the Water Commission. And I've got Don Campbell and Mark Robinson sitting to my left. So all the commissioners are here, as a superintendent, Wiseman, and our office manager, Jen Nash. So we're here to share some information with you all. We hope that you have brought questions. We're anxious to hear your thoughts. Back in 2005, I'm sure you all remember that. That's the last time we raised it. So it's been a while. 2 years ago, 2017, we put together a proposal for some consultants to do a study for us and look at our rates. Take a look at the cost of services that the water department provides to us as residents and see if the rates are sufficient to cover those costs. At the same time, we were looking at our employee benefits packages to make sure that we were paying close enough attention to our employees and indeed going to keep good employees on board in the district. And we ended up making some changes to salaries and benefits, and we feel now that the department is in a good position to move into the 21st century strong. But we have some concerns with the rates, and we heard from the district a couple of years back that they didn't want to entertain any additional management practices that would bring funds into the water district, and instead wanted to look at the rates closely and raise the rates. So that's what we're looking at doing. We've contracted with Tata and Howard, engineers, environmental engineers, to do a rate study. They did a fantastic job for us. And Ryan Nyland is here today to share some slides with you, some information. Before he gets started, I'd like to see if any of the other commissioners have anything to say.
Senior. I'm the junior guy, so I've only been here a year. My name's Mark Robinson, and I was elected last spring. And the commissioner said, "Great, glad to have you on board. We're going to raise the rates." And so that was my introduction to the Water Commission. I just would like to say, though, that you have a handout there with a lot of detail and data. But I think the important thing is that Tata and Howard, through Ryan's work and others there, have produced a lot of the justification for making this department more self-funding. Okay? The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection oversees all the water suppliers in the state. And their policy is to make water districts, water departments as self-funding as possible. Recognize that we do have some supplemental sources of revenue, but the heavy reliance to date has been on your district tax. Okay, so the district tax that you pay, you get your tax bills from the town, it includes the district tax. That district tax supports the work of the district, fire, the water, this hall, and other services. The district tax has been the primary driver, or the primary source of revenues to fund the water department. We're trying to change that equation. If you look at your pie chart, at the beginning of the handout, you'll see this is not an attempt to increase the amount of money available to the water department. Because for every dollar that we're bringing in water rates, we hope and expect to have an offset and a reduction in district tax. I think that's really the takeaway, that we're trying to make sure that people understand tonight that the raising of the water rates should be reflected in a decrease in the district tax, because we won't be using that subsidy through the district tax as much anymore. Now, there's still some reliance on the district tax because the fire protection portion of the water operations need to be funded through the district tax and some of the benefits as well as that. So there will always be some subsidy, but it will not be the heavy subsidy that it has been. I want to make the water rates pay for the water that each individual household or business is using. Okay. I heard an interesting statistic recently that, I think this is a national average, but 75% of a household water use is for irrigation. Not my house, but that's an average nationally. I mean, that's just staggering. 75% of the water use going through the house is going out into the irrigation system. So anyway, Commissioner Campbell.
Okay, so when this first started, we were looking at what I inherited when I became a commissioner was the idea that we're trying to get a 50-50 split between taxes and rates to cover operational expenses and labor and stuff like that. And then because it felt that people that didn't have the water service here should still be paying for fire protection service and all that. And then we started getting some information from the prevention committee that we really need to, we're not really including the capital expenses in what the cost of the water is. And there's going to be more like a 60-40 mix. And there was that combined with the loud, clear message of the people that have been in this room in the past to, if you need more money, look at doing something with the rates. So when we first embraced this project, I personally had a preconceived idea of what it would be, and I was wrong about it. I've grown to believe that if we're going to be self-supporting, we should take on all of our expenses as much as we can. Not only the operational expense, the labor expense, the capital improvement expense, but also the cost of health insurance and retirement expenses of our employees, past and present, to be inclusive of what the real expense of the water department is. And then we wanted to look at trying to offset the cost, mostly with rates. There's still going to be some tax revenue to cover fire protection. But there's going to be a graduated, many more steps, and a graduation of the steps for extra water usage that will weigh a little more heavier on the heavy users. The people, when it's raining outside, you go to work in the morning, you see the sprinkler system on, you know, that costs a lot of money. I don't know if it's really necessary. So it's possible that this may also lead to water conservation, which I think is a positive thing for us. So with that, I think, unless we said everything you need to say.
Good. All right, welcome. Thanks everyone for coming. It's good to see good turnout for everyone so interested in drinking water. My name is Ryan Nealon. I am from Tata and Howard. Introductions did say that we were hired to do this cost of service and water rate study. You all have a handout. A lot of pages, a lot of numbers, a lot of good details. I'm going to try to go through some of that, but fairly quickly. But definitely any questions you got. So with that, I think you all have this first comparison pie chart on the cover of your handout. This kind of gets to the conclusion right at the start, and then we'll kind of back up and say how we got to this point. So on the left side, you have your current revenue structure based on current rates, current fees. You can see that 64% of the water system cost is covered through the district taxes. That's the big yellow slice you see on the left side. And then the other pieces, there's 5% we call other. That's essentially non-rate revenue fees that are collected by the water department. And then there's a basic use, which I think everybody's familiar with. There's a basic use charge that you're billed once a year currently. And then 25% is the excess water use, which essentially is what you're billed based on your water usage above the 20,000 gallons that are included in the base use fee. So that's what it is now. That's what it's based on, the current rates. To the right, we have the next pie chart, which is the proposed revenue structure. And this gets you to where you should be, representative of the true cost of service for the water system. Again, 17% district tax subsidy. It's not really, I mean, we call it district tax subsidy. It's really what is the total cost of service for the water system. That's how much is associated with fire protection. And then going around the triangle again, the base use and the excess water use. Those are based on the proposed rates that you'll see as we get through them tonight. And then the other category again, which is the net rate revenue fees. Doesn't really change much. You'll see when we get to that point in the presentation. We're adjusting some of the fees just a little bit to be more current, because some of the numbers that are in there are old, and we need to make them more current to represent the true cost of some of those fees today. So just some overall information on the water system. Population served here, winter population about 3,300 people, summer 4,950. In 2018, the total water pumped, 207 million gallons of water was pumped from your 5 sources. And the maximum day pumped in 2018, so one day, you pumped 1.74 million gallons of water into the system on the max day. Like I mentioned, sources, there's 5 groundwater sources in town that supply water directly to the system. The distribution system consists of 53 miles of water main varying in sizes. And then, I think most are aware here, there's 2 water storage tanks in the system. The total volume in those storage tanks is 800,000 gallons of water. The value of water. So when you came in tonight, there was a handout on the table. There's a lot of interesting facts and information in this handout. Water is often devalued, in my opinion. In the top left corner of this handout, you can see there's a value of water, and it compares how much a customer's paying now for water versus the other utilities. You can see the drastic difference in how undervalued water is on an annual basis compared to what you're paying for electric, cable internet, and cell phone. And when you think about it, without water, we don't have all these things. Drinking water, public health, how important is water to everyone's health? We just expect it to be there. And it's really more important than cable, electric, everything you can think of. We use water for cooking, showers, laundry, toilet flushing, hospitals, firefighting, agriculture. So I encourage you to read through this handout. There's a lot of good information in there. So as the board mentioned, public water system, financial sustainability. What we listed here is just a couple specific references to where the Mass DEP recommends, or more requires than recommends, that a public water system is self-sustaining. It brings in revenue and supports itself. There's a Chapter 11 in the Mass DEP guidelines for public water systems, which recommends that we review and adjust water rates in a community every 5 years. And it also has direct references that says public water systems revenue shall fully support the cost of the water service, and that's what we're trying to tackle tonight. And then the bottom bullet, Mass DEP Water Management Act permit. So every community, when they pump water from the ground, is issued a Water Management Act permit by the Mass DEP, which identifies certain restrictions on how much water you can draw on a max day or over an annual basis. So in that Water Management Act permit, they have conservation requirements, and again, there's information in it that says a public water system shall establish a revenue structure to fully cover the cost of its public water system. So this chart here just identifies the split between the different expenses that incorporate the water system. So if you go to your handout, which is the 8.5 by 11 sheets, and turn to table number 1, the items listed in table number 1 are the items that make up this pie chart here. So you can see the water department has an annual operations and maintenance budget, and that accounts for 50% of the annual expenses of the water system. There's a debt service number, 24%, and we'll get into that a little bit after, but that includes loans that you currently have to pay for the 2 water storage tanks, for example. And then there's a slice of the pie for employee benefits, that's 15%, and then administrative costs, 11%, that's the yellow color towards the top. And then down at the bottom is this less than 1%, which is capital improvements cost right now. This cost for the water system right now includes things that you currently have loans for, but doesn't really include any future major capital improvements at this point. So you can see the cost now, and you'll see the numbers as we go through them, and that's not even accounting for future water mains that might need to be replaced or future improvements that you need to do to the system. So there's a lot of costs that come with running a water system. This chart here, sort of a repeat. This is back to that front page. It's the same breakdown that we saw before. I'm sure I have my numbers there, but this is a breakdown that we have on the first page. It's the left pie chart. Just splits out the top. There's two 3% there. That's the water system fee revenue, and there's antenna lease revenue that the water system collects on an annual basis. So I'm just going to kind of skip right over this, and we'll come back to that towards the end. So table number 1, as I referred to you in the handout, we have these operation and maintenance costs, capital cost, is debt service cost, which is your current loans, employee benefits, current and retired, and there's administrative costs. So this is the true cost for the water system. On an annual basis, we have fiscal year 19, and then we have projected values for FY20 through FY24. Just one thing that someone might have a question right off the bat, capital plan says minus 3,000 for the first 2 years for FY19 and FY20. What that is when you have a new water service, there's a basic use fee, which is $500 or $600, excuse me. And we've assumed that there's going to be 5 new services each year for the next years. So if you take 5 new services, $600 is the fee associated with that. That works out to $3,000, and it's just an accounting thing. That's where that fee gets put into a capital fee or capital expense or capital revenue. It's more of an accounting thing, but ultimately it's a credit to the bottom line for the cost of the water system. So, like I said, these are your main items that make up the cost for the water system. Just going to kind of run through each of these quickly now. So there's tables if you continue on your packet. The first one, operation and maintenance. If you move on to the next page, page 2, there's a table 1A, a 1B, and a 1C. Table 1A for operations. It identifies salaries and wages, maintenance costs, operations, engineering, training, and service replacements. So that total is $657,000. So that's greater than that $591,633 that you see in there for fiscal year 19. If you move to table 1B, what we tried to do is, this table 1A is the total water department operation and maintenance budget for the year. There's a portion of that budget that really is associated with fire protection. So in table 1B, we went through all the various line items in the budget, and we identified how much cost on an annual basis is associated with fire protection. We got really down into the weeds to figure out this information. So in table 1B, you can see these line items add up. There's about $31,000 that we said was associated with fire protection. And then we looked at the line items in the operations and maintenance budget, and of the line items that some fire protection costs were associated with, we did a ratio there. And ultimately, you can see that these numbers, there's 8.6%, 8.5% at the bottom of table 1B. Those are the percentage of the annual water department's operations and maintenance budget that we determined were associated with fire protection. If you average those years, FY19 through FY24, it's about 9%. So we made the assumption that we didn't catch everything, so we just used the value of 10% of the water department's annual O&M cost is associated with fire protection. So if you look at table 1C, that's essentially what we did. We took the subtotal O&M cost from table 1A above, the 657 in FY19, and then we took the 10%, subtracted the 10%, essentially for fire protection, we come up with that bottom line in FY19 of $591,633, and that's the number you see up here. So that's how we came up with the annual cost for the water system that's associated with the water department's operation and maintenance cost. That's the most difficult one, the rest will go much clearer. So moving on, capital expense, this one's pretty straightforward. I think what you have on your table is just shows the capital plan total, and then it shows the tax levy total, and then a water system total. So again, we looked at the individual line items in the future capital plan and accounted for what was associated with fire protection, that goes on the tax levy, what was associated with the water system, that gets allocated to the water system total. And the bottom line in table 1D, you can see lines up with the numbers that we show in this table number 1 for capital plan. If you move to table 1E, similar type breakdown. Again, we looked at all the debt services, the current loans that the district has associated with water, and we went through all the numbers, determined what was associated with fire protection, what was associated with potable water, the drinking water system, and the bottom line again, we found the debt service total, we determined what was for fire protection, that's the tax levy, and then the water system total at the bottom lines up with what we show here in table number 1. Same thing, employee benefits, we did a similar analysis, looked at what was associated with fire protection, or we looked at different pieces of employee benefits. There's certain benefits associated with folks that are working in the water department, and benefits for folks that are working in the district, either for the fire department or for an administrative position with the district. So we looked at all those numbers, determined which was associated with the water system itself and which was associated with the district, and we apportioned those costs again the same way. And administrative cost, similar thing, is an administrative part of the budget every year for the district, and we went into each line item and determined which was associated with the water system and what was associated with either fire protection or just the general district administrative cost. And in the end, we come to this total expense value, and this essentially is the cost of service for the water system on an annual basis. So, keep going through your handouts, 1F, G. We come to table 1H on page 7. And what this does is it takes this is essentially a repeat of table number 1, but now down at the bottom we add in this non-rate revenue item, which is essentially fees brought in by the water department for things like new services or meter readings or various other fees that they take in on an annual basis. So that non-rate revenue gets factored in and gets subtracted from the total expense, and at the bottom we have a balance of revenue needed to be covered by the water rates. So moving on to table 2, at the top of that you have a balance of revenue needed, that's taken from the bottom line in that last table. I'm not going to go through all these numbers in here, but this is your current existing rate structure shown here, and your tiers, your 20,000, 40,000 gallons, and so on. And we went through all these numbers and did all the math, and if you look down at the bottom, there's a balance, and it's in parentheses, it means it's a deficit. So right now, based on the water rates, and based on that true cost of service for the water system, in FY19 is a deficit of $618,000 based on what it cost for water. And that's being covered by the district taxes. So, what we did next is, on table number 3, I think I mentioned this earlier, we talked about non-rate revenue fees. So these fees haven't been changed for a while. So we looked at all the fees that the water system charges for the various new services or service connections or turn on and offs. Sometimes it's seasonal folks who turn their water systems on and off. So we went through all these fees and we made some slight modifications just to kind of bring them up to where we are today. So that's what table number 3 does. Won't go into too much detail there, but that is what we're proposing for new fees to update the old non-rate revenue fees for the water department. So moving to table 4, it's a repeat of that table number 1 showing all the expenses. And now that non-rate revenue down at the bottom is representative of the new non-rate revenue with the new proposed fees implemented. So there's a little more money coming in just based on the non-rate revenue fees. So we get to a new bottom line, the balance of revenue needed. And you're looking at $1,073,000 for fiscal year 19, for example. So that's the balance of revenue that has to be covered by the water rates.
Yes, not everybody in the back has a handout because there weren't enough. So if you can move slides as you're talking to them or figure out some of the way to orient people. Well, if you can, yeah, that'd be great, because I know there's people in the back who will look at it.
We will also post this on our website tomorrow, right?
Correct.
Jen told me that, yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
you.
So this is table number 5, where I'm at in the handout.
Can you make that any bigger?
Sure can.
We should also mention that this session is being filmed, which we said that earlier. So everybody knows we're very happy to have the assistance of the local scouts, and so this will be the link to the filming will be put on the website of the water department, so anybody can watch this again.
We got to put it on YouTube?
YouTube. I'll post it on YouTube and we'll post a link on the district website.
So the link to the YouTube would be on the website for the district.
So this is table 5 for those of you that have it in the handout. This covers what we needed to increase the rates to in order to cover that true cost of service for the water system. If you look at towards the top here, there's new tiers. We're creating new tiers. We're creating a new billing structure where you bill semi-annually now for water usage versus one annual bill for water usage. It'll actually be, I think, 2 bills for the basic use fee and then 2 bills based on actual water usage, so a total of 4 bills throughout the course of the year. We've modified the tiers. Previously, for example, the first tier was up to $20,000 covered by the basic use. Now it's up to $10,000 covered by the basic use because it's over half the year. And then the new rate structure. This is what we're showing here: $4, $5.50, $7.15, $8.55, $9.70, and those are the tiers and the volume of where you fall, and that's excess use above that 10,000 gallons that's covered within your basic use fee. The basic use fee itself is going to be $40 per bill. And then we're also looking at a meter charge that's going to be billed with the basic use fee, and the next slide gets into that, so I'll save that for that. But with these new rates, you can see that FY19 is still a deficit that's going to have to be covered through the tax subsidy. because these are proposed to be implemented for fiscal year starting FY20 in the plus, so we're close to being balanced, which means the new rates are covering that true cost of service for the water system. As far as the rate increases, down at the bottom right, the rate adjustments, new minimum base use charge of $40 biannually, as I mentioned. And then there's 5 tiers up there. So there's a 122% rate increase for tier 1, 124 rate in tier 2, 165 in tier 3, and then 185 in tier 4 and tier 5. And as you can see, the rate increases go up with the higher tiers, as those are typically your folks that are using water for non-necessity purposes such as irrigation. So trying to keep the rates minimized for those users who are using water for what they need, and increasing the rates a little bit more on those users who are using the water for things like irrigation. So this next table talks about that flat meter base charge. So what's being proposed here is $10 per service in each bill with the basic use fee. So you get the basic use fee of $40 and the meter charge of $10 for a total bill of $50. And this flat meter base charge will be billed biannually with that basic use fee, and just gives the total revenue that's coming in from that. The purpose of this is to provide money for the stabilization fund, which is used for future projects, for emergencies, for a wide variety of things associated with the water system. So moving on to table 7, based on all these rate increases that we talked about and the basic use change, I think what everybody's probably wondering is how that impacts you as the consumer. So what we tried to do here is we listed it in the first column in annual usage in gallons. So this is on an annual basis for someone using 10,000 or 20,000 or 40,000 gallons and so on. Based on the existing rates in the second column is what you're paying now, and the final column to the right is with the proposed rates and meter charge on an annual basis what someone using that same volume of water would be billed. So I think this is kind of a telling chart as to where, depending on where you fall on an annual basis in terms of how much water consumption you have, how much your bill will change. For someone who's 10,000 gallons or less, I mean, it's just the basic use fee and the meter charge. So that's $50 twice a year, which equals $100. So going back to the policy. So with all that information said, we come back to these charts that we started with at the very beginning. Current revenue structure, the rates are not self-supporting the water system. It's currently 64% district tax subsidy, which isn't fair. It's not representative of a water system self-supporting itself. The proposed revenue structure on the right, based on implementation of the proposed rates, reduces that 64% down to 17%. And that 17% district tax subsidy is really representative of the cost of the water system that's associated with fire protection, not potable water usage. That's it.
Thank you.
Questions?
No keep this moderately organized, what I would suggest is that we move this microphone back here. People who have questions can come up to the mic so that everybody can hear those questions as they're posed.
I don't know, we might.
I'm beating Ken Maloney, which is difficult. I'm Jane Oyama, I live on Ocean View Avenue, and I'm grateful to Chris for discovering that I had an overage that was significant at a house we own on Putney Road. It was so significant. They put a bright pink notice on the door. I don't go to that house once a month. So by the time we found it, the cost to the consumer was enormous, huge. Thank you, God, that they let me appeal it. But I would recommend, if you're going to do that system of a drop-off on the door, that you follow up with a call. Perhaps you did, Chris, but I never got one. It was huge, the change. Secondly, did I understand you to say that you turn off or turn on water for summer residents when they come? What is that?
Because some people go away for,
I know, I mean, I have mine turned off and on, yeah.
yeah.
So instead of a plumber, they hire you.
Well, we shut it off at the street, coming in from the street to the
Here.
house. Right, then the
And
plumber
then-
comes in and drains the house.
Thank you, that's the end of the questions, thank you. Take it up.
I can Malloy. Couple of questions. The rate for residences is the same as for companies?
Yes.
And there's something about low income exceptions and other exceptions? Is that, read about that somewhere?
Use your mic.
I'm sorry. I read somewhere that the exceptions for low income and maybe other exceptions.
Ken, just so you know, we've talked about and we're going to put into place an allowance for people that qualify with the town for abatements because of their age or income or something like that. And we're going to try to follow the same standards we use. And what we would probably do is we would maybe cut in half what the average rate cost is, but they still have to pay for the water usage. So if we have $50 or $100 a year for the base pay, we could reduce that, but they would still pay for the water usage. Anything that exceeds that amount. But that's in process. Keenly aware of how this affects people, especially if they're in tight financial terms and stuff like that. So it has been thought about, and we're keeping it, we're going to do something about it.
Again, remember, there should be a reduction in the tax base, so in the overall household budget, if you don't use much water, you're going to win.
Big time.
You're going to win big time through this new proposal.
Hi, my name is Jay Spence. I live on Pine Ridge Road here in Cotuit. Nobody likes rate increases, but I just want to commend you. I think it's an excellent presentation. It's logical. Obviously, a great deal of thought has gone into it, and I think it's really good. I'm one of those guys who irrigates, looking at the new rates. I'm going to reduce my water usage, so you are right on money. But quick question. How do the new rates tie up with other communities and the like? And also, when was the last time rates were raised in Cotuit on a substantial level? Probably applies.
So it was 2005 was the last time we raised the rates in Cotuit. And the new rates that are proposed align closely with the other districts. Depending on which district you look at, the ones that are similar size, it aligns well.
Great, thanks.
And just considering the people that use this water for irrigation, I was talking to Ryan earlier this evening, the first year or two after implementing something like this, there is a major conservation that can be seen, but when people start getting used to their bills, they find it's not quite as bad as they thought it would be, and they went right back to using it the way they did before.
So I'm going to have Miranda grass.
I would just say that I raised two boys here in Cotuit, and somehow they managed to play play wiffle ball, croquet, badminton, tag, everything else on a lawn that's never been fertilized, chemicalized, or irrigated. Somehow they managed. On Cape Cod lawn.
Good evening, I'm Cynthia Gardner, and I want to ask the Prudential Committee a few questions, if I may. I have spoke to the water commissioners about this, and I am for this. I'm just not sure if I'm for it at this time. Tonight they keep saying that we're going to see a decrease in our tax rate, but after attending a couple of Prudential Committee meetings, I've been told by listening to their presentations that is not going to happen. And that's not going to happen not because the water department isn't doing what they're supposed to do, it's because we have not been transparent with how we are spending money as a district. We are going to offset that non-transparency with this water rate. And so everybody needs to be aware that although this is a good idea, don't expect to see a decrease in your tax rate. Am I not correct, Chairman?
Not for, you won't see a decrease for a couple of years, and if there are other projects, then that's going to raise the taxes.
Okay, I have another question.
People can't hear what she said, so I'm going to try to.
Okay.
There will be no change in the tax base the very first year because there has to be a full year of the water rate change before it is shown on the tax rates after that. So the first year is going to be a hit. We're well aware of that. You'll be doing the same taxes and we'll be paying more for the water until that there's a whole year that goes through, and then they can take what we have a history of and reduce the taxes from the usage of water to the rates.
That's not what she said.
What I said was for, well, if you're going to do it over 1 year, but if other projects come along, like painting the water tanks, which is over $100,000, is that going to be covered by the water rates, or is that something that the district will cover?
The water tanks get cleaned and painted, was it every 15 or 20 years?
One has a guaranteed life of 20 years, the other, it won't be 15 at least.
So 15 to 20 years, the cost is closer to $1 million to do something like that. Therefore, one of the stabilization fund that we're proposing with that $20 a year for meter rental is to try to establish a fund and offset some of those major capital expenses to minimize the effect on the taxpayer.
If I can just chime in, so as part of these projections for the next 5 years, we have included tank inspections and tank cleanings as necessary in the budget. So what you see as the bottom line over the next 5 years includes, for the water system at least, the costs that are going to be needed for it to fully function, to clean tanks, to do anything that it needs to do. That's included in these numbers already. Now, if there's a separate project that's not water system related.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to point out. It's not to do with the water department, it's other projects that have been occurring within this district now, in the past, and in the future. You need to be aware of that. The other thing you need to be aware of that we have still not really closed the books on the High Street, 56 High Street property. That is still something that we continue to try to steal from Peter to pay Paul. It needs to be made.
It's not true.
Okay, if it's not true, then please explain to me why we had to ask the town of Barnstable to release $118,000 and $118,399 from the tax overlay surplus account to cover a $164,000 deficit from 2017. We are still short $45,000. I don't know where that money came from. I've asked and it's never been answered. And when I look at the expenditures that's posted on the website, there's $60,000 of accounts missing from the water department revenue that we voted on in years fiscal 14 and 15. So I'd like someone to explain to me where that $60,000 went and where the other $45,000 came from to cover our $164,000 deficit.
all, we paid cash for 56 High Street, that's been paid for in cash, we don't owe any money on that. As to the rest of your other questions, I don't think they're appropriate questions for tonight. I don't have the charts in front of me. I think those are questions for budget night when the treasurer's here. But tonight we're here to talk about water rates at the moment, and I think that's what the time should be spent on.
We should make clear that the water rates are the responsibility of the Cotuit Water Commission, this board here. So the voters vote on district tax. Okay, that's the legislative function of the voters who come to the district meetings. The water rates are set by the commissioners. So we're trying to respond to the request from the district to adjust these rates to reflect the true cost of operation. All the other considerations, I think, are for another night.
Any other questions?
Hey, I'm Lally Lloyd. I live on Vineyard Road, and I want to thank you all for a really clear presentation on a pretty complicated matter tonight. I just have a sort of big picture question about that goes to something that I'm gathering has been an assumption in this work, and that is the importance of shifting the cost of water usage from district tax to water use. And I just want to confirm my understanding. I think what we're doing by these rate changes is that we're shifting the burden of paying for the water from our property taxes to the people who are actually using the water. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's also, there's an adjustment in how the rates are made towards the higher users. The very basic user is going to stay pretty stable, and they're going to make up pretty good. The people who use it a lot, we have some million-gallon-a-year users.
Yeah, I picked that up.
So that's they're going to pick because they use more, they're going to pay more.
Yeah.
Be more responsible for that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
In addition to the presentation from Tata and Howard, which is on our website, the Cotuit Water Department, there'll be access to this session on the YouTube. We also have a lot of written materials posted on the website. We're trying to get the word out, and unfortunately, most of Cotuit is not here tonight. They're going to get they're going to get a water bill in the near future that's going to, smack them upside the head. We're doing as much as we can to get the information out. We encourage you to tell people you know, your friends, neighbors, to learn about this so they're not blindsided and they can start to maybe adjust their water uses. One gentleman said here tonight. But it's hard to get the word out to everybody. We put a little yellow flyer in with the most recent water bill. And I've asked several of my very sophisticated, well-read people in the community, do you remember seeing that card? No, I couldn't see it. How many people saw the yellow card? Okay, well, that's good. But, we're trying to get as much word out as possible. It's a big change. We understand that. But we really want to drive home this point that it's necessary comply with the EP's regulations, that the pie is not growing, the pie is shifting the size of the slices, okay? And we continue to believe that Cotuit's water is the best on the cake.
There's no more time for another question.
It's Rebello, 309 School Street, unless anyone questioned. My brother-in-law's on the board. He didn't pay me for this, doesn't matter. I spoke to several people encouraging them to come tonight because I knew of the importance, and the feedback I got from many of them was they've done a great job. The information came in the water bill, the information has come through the currents, and they're doing what we asked. We should be paying higher rates for our water, so I just want to commend you people. Oh, also, I went on the website, clicked, found things through the frequently asked questions, had another question, but it said send an email. I sent an email, I had a very prompt response, and I understood it, which was amazing.
If there's no more questions, there's one thing that I feel like I need to say about this whole process that is an increase over something we've never done before. When we talked about the stabilization fund, something we've had on the books for a long time that we've never used and never collected any money for, that we will have the opportunity at this next district meeting to vote on changing that stabilization fund wording to include funds that we get from a meter reading charge or a meter charge every year to build up money to use for capital expenses to offset the cost of borrowing money. So it's a $20 a year meter rental charge, for no lack of any other word. It's split up over twice a year. When you first bill of the year, when this could be half of your basic rate, there'll be $10 added to that. The third bill, which will be the second half of your basic rate, there'll be $10 added to that. That will accumulate to a little over $45,000 a year. As it accrues and it grows, we'll use that when it comes time to major capital expenses to offset the cost of borrowing money and try to keep our rates as level as possible. If we don't do something like that, the rates can fluctuate quite a bit depending on some of the things that may be coming down the road that are unforeseen. So it's like an investment and try some sort of control over keeping the rates as level as possible of any major adjustment every 5 years.
Will the water department control that stabilization fund?
If it passes the way it's worded, the water department will have control of it. If the water, that $20 a year that goes into that fund can only be used by the water department and it has to be voted on by the people in the district to be expended.
But it doesn't go into any general district funds,
No.
which is the I was trying to get to. So that fund would be available only for use if that is passed the way it's worded for the water department, which is the whole purpose of creating the fund in the first place. Any other questions from anyone? Any comments? Good job.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Tomorrow night at 5:30, we do have a commissioners meeting here. So if anything comes up tonight and you want to ask a question, you can swing by tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we'll be here. Hopefully no later than 6:30.
We'll be serving cocktails.
At this point, if there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion for the water commission